Hi everyone, welcome to week 3 of PHOT-1064. So we have lots to do this week. We'll take a look at the readings and the videos in a moment, but just want to reflect back on what we did last week. I gave this to you, it's on Fanshawe Online. I just want to stress that make sure you hang on to that document, use it to help you practice for the midterm and for the final exam. And if there's anything on this sheet that you couldn't fill in, you didn't understand, maybe you were consistently getting the answers wrong, send me an email. We'll sit down, we'll make an appointment, we'll sit down, we'll talk, and we'll go through the sheet and make sure you can answer the questions. Also last week, I had you guys do this assignment that I called 3 Shades of Gray. Very simple assignment, but I hope it produced some aha moments for some of you. Maybe you've been used to taking pictures for a while and you've noticed but sometimes when you're shooting in auto or P mode, your pictures turn out too dark or too bright, and you're just wondering, why are things so inconsistent? And hopefully by photographing the whiteboard and the blackboard, you realized, oh, that's what's going on. My meter is just reading the scene wrong. It's being fooled by the fact that the objects are white and black, and it's trying to make them gray. So that leads me into this other topic of exposure compensation. I don't really want to give a lesson on it. That's something that will happen in your practical class. But I thought I would just sort of talk a little bit about what exposure compensation is there for. And it's to allow you to continue working in auto mode or P mode, but when you can predict or you're not getting the result that you want, you can go in and sort of tweak auto exposure by telling the meter in your camera to make the picture a little bit brighter or a little bit darker. And essentially, if you go into exposure compensation, and this is just a generic diagram, everyone's meter or display on their camera is a little bit different, but they all kind of essentially show you the same information. There's a spot in the middle, which is your light meter doing what it's programmed to do or what it's calibrated to do. And then you can go and override it and tell it, no, I want you to make my picture darker by going towards the -1 and -2 side. If you go to +1 and +2 side, the pictures will get brighter. So here's probably a better example. If you were to leave your exposure compensation where it is centered and its neutral position, and you were to photograph something like this, and this is a white wall with a white desk and a white picture frame. It's a very bright scene, but that's the way it's supposed to be. The wall's white. But if you leave your camera in just a normal auto exposure, it's going to think that it's a typical scene and try to make it gray. So it will choose an aperture and a shutter speed that's going to make the photo gray. So this might be what you see, but this is what your picture that your camera is going to produce. When you look at the back, you might be, oh, that's a little bit dark. It's not quite what I was expecting. And this is a classic case of when you need to use exposure compensation. So you might, and that's a very bright scene, you probably might need to go +1, +1 1/3, maybe even +2 before that picture will match the original scene that you're looking at. So that was just a review of some of the concepts that we talked about last week. This week, we've got a lot to read and a lot to cover. We're going to talk about aperture again. We've already talked about like how it fits into the whole exposure triangle. But this week, we're just going to look at it a little bit more in detail. Where do those F numbers come from? What does F8 mean exactly? What does F11 mean? Where does that number come from? We'll also talk about depth of field. And by now, you should have already started to appreciate the concept of deep depth of field and shallow depth of field. But this will just sort of reinforce maybe what you already know. And it'll start talking about something that's a little bit more complicated. It'll talk about the hyperfocal distance. It's a bit complicated, but just hang in there. It'll make sense as you watch the videos and do the readings. We'll also talk about focal length, which I have spelt incorrectly up there, so I'm going to fix that right now. Might as well just do it. Can't believe I had a spelling mistake on my video. Anyways, we'll talk about focal length. And again, focal length, not too difficult of a concept, but some students have asked me, well, where does 28 millimeter come from? Where does 50 millimeter come from? What does it mean when we say a lens is 50 millimeter? We know that when you use a 28, it looks different than if you were to use a 50. And when I say different, I mean what you see in the viewfinder. But what do those numbers mean and where do they come from? And we'll talk about that in the second video. But before you watch the second video, here's the work that we're doing for this week. So first thing is there's some pages on the Ben Long textbook. There's a website called Cambridge in Color. This is a website that just has some awesome photos and awesome articles that explain some complicated concepts in a way that makes it easy to understand. So if you have any desire to explore some of the theory and concepts behind photography in more depth, some great articles there. Well, we're going to go there this week, and we're going to read an article on depth of field, and we're also going to read an article on this pretty advanced topic called hyperfocal distance. But there's a reading quiz that goes along with those readings, and then on lynda.com I have another playlist for week 3, and there's I think there's 3 videos there. Again, they're short and they're also about depth of field. And then I found this other website that was made by a photographer named Brenda Petrella. Her video just walks her through going up to do a shoot, and she's explaining how she's using the hyperfocal distance. So nice little video, nice break from some of the videos that we've been watching so far. And then after you do all that, I'll have another video for you guys to watch where I'm going to provide you with the takeaways and sort of let you know what I wanted you to get out of this week's lesson. Anyway, that's it for this video. Do the work, and I'll see you in the next video.